to Proof Garage YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the gear that I chose for the Mercedes-Benz for the sound system. If you haven't watched the last two videos, please do. The problem and the thought process behind the equipment selection. So today I'll be revealing kind of what I chose, which I led on my last video, the direction I was going, but I modified it a little bit since then. Alright, so we'll talk through some of the older equipment that I had. So this is the Audison Bit 10. This was in both GLKs as well as Ford Focus that I had, a 2016 Ford Focus that had the Sony system, is what I originally purchased it for. That is my subwoofer amp in my previous, well, in all three of those cars. It's a PDX M12. I was wrong on the original video. I used to have an M6. I swapped it for an M12 at one point, so that's a 1200 watt monoblock Alpine Class D switching amp. This is the Moscone amp, Moscone 130.4, 4-channel. That was my speaker amp, and in my last two Mercedes, I ran, actually, and in the Focus too, I ran these Focal components. They're a Focal K2 Power 165 KR, and I just pulled them out of the box. That's why it's a little flat. It just comes back. And then these are the tweeters that I run. They're the K2 Power tweeters. I did also have a system in, well, I had a subwoofer in my Golf R, because that had a factory Fender system, which actually wasn't too bad. So that's the subwoofer amp that was in the Golf R. It's a PDR M65. As far as subwoofers are concerned, I have this JBL to GTO 804 single 4-ohm 8-inch subwoofer that was in the Golf. This is what was in the Mercedes. It's a AudioFrog GS10. I believe it's a dual 2-ohm, so it wires out to 4. And it's in a Bassworks box. This Bassworks box is it's like their RS series, RS10 sealed box. I have a couple other odds and ends. I have a couple distribution blocks that are still in box and I haven't really done anything with. Here's some of the original boxes, the Focal crossovers, which I'm not going to be using. I have some RCA cables, like this guy connects from the channel 5 output into my PDX M12, both the right and left inputs. It's just basically a RCA-Y. These are signal cables for the speakers. So I have a couple different, these are Audio Quest Emerald cables, which aren't crazy, but they're still pretty good. These are ones that I actually bought that are custom built. They're 7924 cables. I think they're Mogami cables, and they have these Amphenol ends on them. So I have a couple odds and ends in terms of stuff there. I did purchase about 100 feet of 16 gauge Stinger Pro Series copper, fully copper speaker wire, and I purchased quite a bit of the Stinger 4 gauge, so that'll be my power wire. A lot of people do red and black, or they do different colors and stuff like that. I'm not building a rainbow. I like doing the black cables, and I can mark both ends to just be sure that I know what's what. So that's some of the equipment that's going to be installed. And then, some other things like the ends for the amplifier. I have a bass knob. Here's the other K2 Power 165 KR. And some of the previous installation materials. This is a fuse distribution block that was in the Mercedes. I have a fuse holder for under hood. I have a circuit breaker somewhere, 120 amp circuit breaker. So kind of go through some of that stuff more as we get closer to the installation. And then I do have some more like in-wall speaker wire and 8 gauge and other assorted stuff. So for door woofers, I picked up a pair of these AudioFrog GS40s, which are a 4-inch mid-bass. They can be used as a 4-inch component set. They can be used as a mid-range in a 6-inch 3-way set. So you have like a 6, a 4, and a tweeter. So I picked these guys up as 4-inch speakers, and then I actually also bought a pair of GS10 Audio Frog tweeters. But I ran into a problem where the Audio Frog tweeters have a bezel on them that's not removable. So it makes it difficult for me to stick them into the back of the factory tweeter pods that are here without heavily modifying the tweeter pods. And conversely, in my last Mercedes, which had 7-inch speakers in the door, I put a pair of 6.5-inch focals in there. So those focals have tweeters. They're K2 Power series. They have the concave cone technology, where like they're not like a normal silk dome tweeter where it kind of protrudes like this. Instead, they're inverted, but they actually go right into the factory tweeter pods without issue, and they did on my last 2 Mercedes that they were in. Since I'm going to be running this system as fully active, I don't have to worry about crossover points between these woofers and the tweeters with passive crossovers. I can do whatever I want to because I'm running it fully active. So I'm gonna use those focals and try those out. If those don't sound good when I am finished with the system, apparently Audio Frog makes some sort of variation of the GS10s that don't have the ring around them, so I can try other options. But you know, talking about the cost and everything that we went into in the last video, so I spent 219 bucks on these. Everything else I had, except for wiring, spent about 200 bucks on wiring, give or take. So really, I'm going to be into the system for about $450 plus all the equipment that I already had, which is obviously tremendously expensive, as I went over in the last video. So you know, the next thing that I think we want to do is go through the wiring, what was needed, and kind of the planning behind it. So I'm just going to kind of point this here, and then I'll get the wiring and kind of lay it out here so we can talk through what's needed. All right, so let's get all of the wiring that I have. And I actually have a fair amount of extra. So we'll get what I think I need. All right. So first of all, with most amplifier installations, you need power wire that needs to come from the main battery. Now, in my last Mercedes-Benz, I actually lucked out because the car had a battery in the back and a battery in the front. The battery in the back is designed to work with the Eco Start-Stop system, so it runs the accessories while your car shuts off. And then if it gets too low, there's a relay in the back that senses that, and it turns the ignition back on and starts the car and whatever, and then the one that's under the hood starts and runs the car. So in my GLK350, I ran my amplifiers right off of that battery that was in the back, and I actually disabled Eco Start Stop in that car, so it wasn't even possible for the car to shut off, but I never ran into any issues with that, and I had it that way for 3 years in 2 different vehicles. In this car, the Eco Start Stop system is, there's a capacitor that's under the dash that controls it. So really that doesn't contain enough power. There is a fuse box in the back, but it's pretty small. It's only fed by a single 4-gauge, and it runs a couple of other systems there. So I don't want to tap off of that for my amplifiers, because between the two of them, they can draw 60 to 100 amps. And I don't want to basically blow the fuse that feeds that entire fuse box, which is definitely possible. So I have 4-gauge. This is New Concepts Colossus cable. You can get it on eBay. You can get it from New Concepts. You can get it from a variety of places. They sell it by the foot. I have like 20 feet of it here, and it's all black. I'm going to be using black for power and black for ground. A lot of people use red for power, blue for power, and then black for ground. I like that the black stays hidden if there's any spots where like in between seats or something like that, you might catch an inch of the wire that you can see visible with your eyes. So I like it to be black, so it's just hidden. You can also wrap a red in tape if you needed to. So I have that. I'm going to be using the Audison Bit 10 processor and the Moscone 1 and the Alpine PDX M12. So from a connection standpoint, there's going to be power that feeds this and this. There's going to be a ground for each of these amplifiers. And then these are going to be fed signal from our Audison processor here. So if we imagine something along these lines, the Audison is going to take speaker wire inputs, so a pair of wires from the front door on this side and a pair of wires from the front door on the other side. You can put rears into it too if you need to, and it can sum them. It can do fader and stuff like that, but in my case, I'm not using rears. I don't care about rears, so I'm just going to kind of leave that alone. So this has 5 outputs, left and right front, left and right rear, which are going to be reassigned as my tweeters, and then subwoofer output. The subwoofer output is a single channel, and most amplifiers have a left-right input for subwoofer. So I use one of these RCA Y cables, so it's a single in to 2 outs, which allows me to feed both of the inputs on this amp with the mono sub signal. So that goes there like that. And then we're going to have our fronts and rears. So we'll use these as fronts, like that. And we'll connect that to the, say, the A speakers. And then we're going to have another set of outputs that will connect to these are directional, to the rears. And really, these are a little bit shorter than the other ones, so I should be flipping those around. So let's do that. So we'll make these the B's. We'll make these the A's. Like that. Okay. So that's kind of how we're going to end up. This will all be in the back. I'm going to hide it under the storage panel here. So there's a factory crate here, as well as a like just empty pocket that sits here. And then I've got a couple of these crates that I put in here and some other stuff. So I'll just kind of pack around it, and I'll build an amplifier board for over in that corner, and that's kind of where everything will live. I have no spare in this car, so there isn't one to take up room. I guess the one benefit of not having a spare. So then, what else do we need, right? Well, we need speaker wire. We need quite a bit of it, actually. So what I need to do is I have to provide a feed to that Audison from the door speaker. And really, I could get this anywhere. I could get it from the head unit, but you'll understand why I'm picking the door speaker. So I have to get a feed to the Audison from the door speaker. Then, from the output of the amplifier, the Moscone, I have to deliver 2 wires back, or two pairs of speaker wire back, for the woofer and the tweeter independently. So it's going to be something like this. And then I'm going to have to deal with the same thing on the driver's side. So I need 3 runs of speaker wire on the passenger side, like that. And then I need 1, 2, 3 runs on the driver's side. Now, I bought 100 feet of speaker wire. So if we divide that up, I need 6 runs, 3 on each side. So that works out to 16.66 feet a piece. So what I'll probably do is cut like 3 15s, and then on the other side, 55 divided by 3, which is, you know, whatever, 19, 18, 18 and a third. So I'll have 15s and 18s because the passenger side is going to come straight back and go into the amplifier, but the driver side is going to have to go straight back and across the back to the amplifier board because everything's going to be on the passenger side. So those need to be a little bit longer. And I'll cut this beforehand because I know 15 feet is enough. That's a lot for the passenger side. So I know I'm going to have leftover on all three, but that gives me the opportunity to run all three cables at the same time. So we've got our power, we've got our grounds, we've got our signal and our speaker outs. And normally you want to separate your signal and your power because you don't want the amplifier to pick up noise. In my case, I'm using high-level inputs into the bit 10, so noise isn't going to be as big of a factor because I'm going to have a lot of power going through the speaker wires to begin with. All the factory amplification will be there. So I don't have to be as careful, but I'm still going to try to separate them as much as I can. I do have a couple of these distribution blocks that have, they have 3 4-gauge input-output and one that's 1 over 0 or 1 aught. So I'll use these and I'll have my power come in and then the 2 outputs for my 2 amplifiers, the 4-gauge that goes to each of them. And I'll make some kind of board that's carpeted in black that'll fit there and kind of mount the amplifiers and just give them a place to rest. You know, just so they're not kind of flopping around as I'm driving the car and stuff like that. So that's really about it. I'm going to start on the installation, start working on some of the wiring and getting everything in, and then after that we'll work on some of the speakers and getting all of that in. Really, running the wires through the channels takes a lot of effort, but it doesn't render the car unable to be driven, if that makes sense. Like if I unsnap a couple plastic pieces and I run the cables and I leave a ball rolled up in my passenger floor, my driver floor, I can still, you know, drive the car to work or something like that if I don't finish it. So try to get as much done here as I can, and then you know, we'll kind of go from there. One thing I did forget to mention, normally down the driver's side, I like to run an extra cable, which is a Cat 5e or a Cat 6, normally Cat 5e network cable. And the reason that I do that is because it allows me to connect like a bass knob or something along those lines. It contains 8 wires. You can terminate it with RJ11 or RJ45 connectors. I have the tools to terminate it, so it's fairly easy. And it allows me to, you know, like my Alpine amp, I connected my bass knob with it. I just put RJ11s on both ends, and you know, that worked just fine. But if I decide to change out my processor to something different that has a controller or whatever, like I can just re-terminate it in the future. And then also, when I get rid of the vehicle, I don't necessarily have to worry about taking the factory, like the cable that comes with your thing, out of it, which is often a pain in the butt. I can just cut the end off and pull it back through, so it's nice and easy. So, piece of Cat 5, it's nice to have. If you don't have any Cat 5, you're probably better off buying a roll because you want the solid core stuff, and if you buy a patch cable, it's often not going to have the solid core stuff or be terminatable.